You know, when the president of the Cypress Creek Estates HOA, a woman named Veronica Sterling, decided to weld my ranch gate shut at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, I didn't just lose access to my property. I lost a significant chunk of faith in suburban humanity. It was an act of pure, distilled arrogance done under the cover of darkness. But what they didn't realize was who they were messing with. My name is Elias Thorne, and before inheriting my grandfather's land, I spent a decade in Boston specializing in municipal infrastructure and, crucially, easement law. My grandpa, bless he, his soul raised me to believe that a good neighbor is worth more than a gold mine. But finding that heavy steel plate bolted across my century-old oak gate, with a laminated notice flapping in the breeze about non-conforming agricultural aesthetics, well, that just made peaceful coexistence a non-starter. My family's 40 acres, which we call the Redwood Bluff, had bordered Cypress Creek, this upscale development, for generations. Grandpa had always been fair, even granting them temporary access years ago for their original utility work. But now, they wanted it all. I called the number on the notice. A voice dripping with honey and ice, Veronica Sterling's voice, answered. She spoke about recent county rezoning and community enhancement protocols that now covered my land. "Miss Sterling," I said, trying to keep the engineer's calm in my voice, "there has been no rezoning. My property is legally separate from your HOA. You have committed vandalism and criminal trespass. You have 1 hour to remove this apparatus, or I call the sheriff." Her laugh was the sound of a closing bank vault. "Mr. Thorne, perhaps you haven't been properly informed. We've merely taken the initiative to begin enforcement of our very clear, very necessary community standards. Your contractors will need to apply through our Architectural Review Committee. That'll be a $600 application fee, and the review process takes approximately 3 weeks. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about fences. It was about power, and a very clumsy land grab. I hung up before I could lose my cool, grabbing the heavy-duty cutters from my truck and spending an hour sweating, grinding through their shoddy welding job. Later that day, while walking the fence line, I met my first ally, Agnes Peterson, a sharp, silver-haired woman in her late 60s who was a retired civil court clerk. She shook my hand and said, "You must be Carl's grandson. I've been documenting Veronica's antics for 2 years. They've been trying to get their hands on this bluff ever since your grandpa got sick. The rumor is they want to expand, and your land sits on the highest, most desirable point." Agnes, armed with binders full of meeting minutes and photos, confirmed my suspicions. Veronica had transformed the HOA into her personal kingdom, using it to push developers' interests. They wanted a second entrance to their community, and the only viable route for heavy equipment was right across the back of my property. That night, I went through Grandpa's files, looking through the old surveys, the deeds, and then I found the folder labeled the Keystone Strategy. It had the original development agreement, explicitly excluding the Redwood Bluff from any future HOA jurisdiction, signed and notarized. But the real treasure was the detail about that overgrown path in the back corner, the one I'd seen fresh tire tracks on. It wasn't mine. It belonged to an obsolete shell corporation, Cascade Timber Holdings, which had abandoned the region years ago and was quietly liquidating its assets. The logging road the HOA had been using for its fancy landscaping trucks, it was on that separate 5-acre parcel. I had also recently inherited enough money from Grandpa's trust to be very, very dangerous. I checked the listing for that 5-acre tract, $950,000. It was steep, but it was perfect. The next day, Agnes called. "Elias, they're expecting a massive shipment of travertine and marble for the new clubhouse fountain tomorrow morning. It's coming via the old logging road. Materials worth close to $80,000. I smiled for the first time since seeing the welding scars on my gate. Grandpa hadn't just left me land, he'd left me a target. I called my lawyer and my financial advisor. The Keystone Strategy was now active. I moved faster than any HOA board ever could. By dawn, I had the preliminary ownership agreement for the 5-acre lot and a team out installing markers. I didn't just put up a gate. I built a functional temporary toll station, a barrier, arm, a solar panel, a high-res camera system, and a laminated sign. The price of admission? $850 per vehicle, payable via the QR code linked to my newly created holding company, Bluff Access Solutions. At 10:30 a.m., the cavalry arrived, 3 flatbed trucks loaded with marble, followed by Veronica Sterling's black Range Rover, emblazoned with the obnoxious Cypress Creek logo. They stopped dead at my new barrier arm. Veronica rolled down her window, her face tight with disbelief. "What in the hell is this, Elias?" she hissed, dropping the pleasantries. I approached calmly, holding up the notarized deed. "This, Miss Sterling, is private property, specifically the private access road. You and your contracted vendors have been criminally trespassing on for years. Access today is a simple transaction, $850 per vehicle, due before entry." She actually laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "This is extortion. We have a scheduled delivery. This is an essential access road for the community." "It's a private road on private property," I corrected, allowing a slight, satisfied twitch in my smile. "I'm willing to accommodate your delivery, but for 7 vehicles, including the excavator trailer, that comes to $5,950. Wire transfer or credit card, Miss Sterling?" She went for her phone, threats about injunctions and the sheriff tumbling out. I encouraged her. "Please call them. I'll enjoy watching the deputy review my clean deed and your record of unauthorized use." 15 agonizing minutes later, a very irritated deputy arrived, listened to both sides, and pointed to Veronica. "Ma'am, Mr. Thorne has the legal right to control access to his property. I suggest you deal with him or find another route." The victory was sweet, but the real payoff came when she finally, furiously swiped her card. As the last marble truck rolled through, I walked back to her window and handed her an invoice, not for the $5,950 she'd just paid, but for a bill totaling $21,250. "What is this?" she gasped. "That," I explained, "is the access fee for the 25 unauthorized deliveries your vendors have made over the last 3 months, captured perfectly by my grandfather's security cameras. Trespass carries a penalty, Miss Sterling. And I accept payment in full within 7 days." The look on her face, that was worth the whole $950,000 investment. But she wasn't done. The counterattack was swift. More ridiculous fines, character assassination through community bulletins, and finally, getting a county commissioner, her golf buddy, to issue an emergency access permit based on a clearly falsified water quality report. That's when I knew I had to go all in. I upped the game. The temporary barrier was replaced by a sophisticated, automated smart toll system with license plate recognition. And facing the community pool area, I installed a 30-foot-high LED billboard, my side of the fence. It cycled through graphics showing the HOA's financial discrepancies, the $21, $250 invoice, and the question, "Where is your $600 application fee really going, Cypress Creek?" The billboard broke her. People started asking questions. Agnes and Russell, the retired judge, compiled the evidence. The final showdown happened at the emergency HOA meeting, where she tried to smear me one last time. Russell stood up and calmly, surgically dismantled her entire operation, exposing the embezzlement, the self-dealing contracts with her sister's landscaping firm, and the falsified county documents. In her rage, she made the fatal mistake, blurting out loud, "What choice did we have but to take matters into our own hands?" Dealing with that? Stubborn old man, and now his difficult grandson, as that was the confession. The whole room erupted. The board was voted out on the spot. Justice was swift after that. My last camera footage, her in the dead of night directing the physical destruction of my original gate with power tools, was the final nail. Within 48 hours, she was arrested. The true victory wasn't the arrest, though. It was a month later, when the new legitimate HOA board and I sat down. I donated the $70,000 in accumulated toll fees and penalties to a community fund for victims of the previous board. I rebuilt my gate, a simple, beautiful wood design, and I left it open during daylight hours. I granted them a legal, limited emergency access easement, establishing the boundaries of good faith. My grandfather always said, "Good fences make good neighbors, but the best neighbors don't need fences." Today, my gate stands open, and the original electronic toll booth, I converted it into a very expensive solar-powered flower planter on my front lawn, a constant reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's helping a community reclaim its soul.